Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Millennials Are Old podcast, where you know what? As always, we're fucking old. We're old millennials. In fact, we are now 30 something old fucking millennials. It's depressing and sad. But you know what? Sometimes we just need to laugh. We need to find things that are funny. We're men who like things that are very funny. And speaking of funny and men, let's get into the 1994 British horror comedy classic, Funny Man. Now, Brian, this was your recommendation for this week's episode. Now, neither of us have seen this fucking movie before. You showed me the trailer on Messenger, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? We should watch this.
Well, a recurring theme on the show is generational conflicts, the way that the lens of time kind of abstracts or sometimes makes clearer themes that are hidden in a piece of media. And I felt like, we really wanted to look at a film that was about the conflict between boomers and Gen X. We don't do a lot of Gen X films. And I saw this film and I just saw in it such a ragtag bunch of slacker kids beset upon by a cackling, entitled old man. And also, wow, this movie looked fucking insane. I don't remember quite when I learned about it. Is my real reason it's fucking insane or looks insane. I couldn't think of any other context where anyone else that I'd be able to get to watch this movie, really, except for you. And I was just like, what is this movie? Why have I never heard of this? Because this is the type of movie that we would have heard about in our lives. And what is it? Like, and it sits in a weird place in horror, which is post slasher boom, pre-Scream, which I'll get into in a little bit. I have some thoughts on that. I was just like, I need to see this movie and I need to talk about it and figure out what's going on with it.
Yes, and when you did share the trailer with me, I remember watching it, and I saw it, and I was like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah,
This is a bizarre trailer. That actually I was reading on YouTube on the comment section of the movie on YouTube because fun fact to the audience at home, this full movie is on YouTube. And
it's a rip. It looks good.
It
Sounds good.
is a very good rip. It's pretty high definition, and I will be posting it in the comment section when I post this on YouTube, so y'all can watch it. But interestingly enough, so the song that plays in the trailer apparently was like a fairly big single in Europe.
Yeah,
and it came from this movie, which I thought was very interesting. So
there is a whole ass soundtrack album to this movie. I was only able to find a couple of tracks from it, including the what's the name of that track? It's like a techno. It's a very generic, to be honest, like house rave '90s dance thing.
It's very Eurodance. It's very Eurodance.
It sucks.
Yeah, it's not great. Although to be fair, the vast majority of Eurodance is pretty bad.
Yeah, I like some electronic music. That is not a genre, It's like Night at the Roxbury type music, but worse.
Yes, very much so. But yes, let's get into some details here before we get too much into it. So this film came out in 1994. It was rated R. It was directed by the director Simon Sprackling, and it was written by him as well. Now, unfortunately, Simon Sprackling is not really known for anything other than this film. He's directed several other movies that he's credited on IMDb for, but none of them have even remotely the notoriety that this movie has. And this movie doesn't even have that much notoriety to it. So that's really saying that he was unfortunately not a very prolific and popular director, that's for sure.
The whole thing is just that you hear about this movie and there isn't a ton of information on it, but there's some big names attached to it, and it's not like a super low budget movie for the type of movie it is and the time it was made. It's just exists in this place.
Very much so. Yeah, that's the thing. We'll get into the budget in just a moment here, but yeah, it is very interesting to me that this movie looks like, and I think I told you this in the chat, but it reminds me of if Peter Jackson directed a Full Moon movie.
Yeah.
That's what it reminds me of a lot. Like, it has very much of the themes and like shot comp and cinematography that a Full Moon movie would have, but it has some of the more like higher budget accoutrements of like an early Peter Jackson movie.
The big ambition, the kind of over the top gorgeous, the weird Looney Tunes and Python-esque like comedy. Like, yeah. When you said Peter Jackson, that really clicked a thing where I was like, oh, that is kind of what it is. Yeah. In that, not as good as like Dead Alive or Bad Taste, but it is in that wheelhouse.
Oh yes, and not spoil my opinions too much in this movie, but most definitely, Dead Alive is the superior version of this movie by quite a bit.
Dead Alive's a masterpiece.
Oh, it is fantastic film. I would definitely recommend that to all of my Millennials Are Old podcast heads out there, or the Maos, if you will.
But the Maoists.
Yeah, the Maoists. Oh shit. But yes, this movie is about 90 minutes long. Now, interestingly enough, the rip on YouTube does not have the ending credits, but apparently the ending credits is sung, or there's a song being sung in the ending credits that Christopher Lee does, which I thought was very interesting. I know, it really sucks that I also tried downloading it from Giphy and Pirate Bay, but it really seemed like a really sketch download, so I did not bother with that. It gave me a lot of red
from not hearing that song.
It gave me a lot of red flags, so I was just like, nope, I'll just take the one without the credits. But yes, you're talking about budget. This movie did have a budget of about $1 million, which in 1994 for this type of movie is pretty massive.
It looks good. Like, I mean, it's pretty effects heavy. There's some pretty big sets. I'm almost positive they did the Roger Corman thing of finding a location and then kind of building the film around that.
Yes, I will agree with that. I do think that the sets are pretty good. I think there's a lot of good set pieces. But yes, it is definitely I would say, a very bombastic, low budget movie. And also this movie does not have a box office listed, so I assume this movie did not do very well at the box office, if it was even released in wide distribution in the first place, which I don't probably think it was.
I would love to see this movie in a theater, though. I actually recommended it to my favorite local cult theater here in Portland, because they have a monthly VHS thing where they show movies like this, and I just want to see this in a theater so bad.
Well, Brian, never mind. We'll get into it at the very end of the episode, but that certainly could be possible if you have a home media release of this film. And then speaking of the last point of the details here, this movie does not have a critic aggregate on Rotten Tomatoes, but it has a 53% audience score. Now, it has one listed review for critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, and it is fresh, which I was actually kind of surprised by, to be honest.
Well, you got to figure, right, that this is the type of movie that if you've even heard about it, you're probably someone like us who are inclined, I assume you feel this way too. I'm inclined to like stuff like this. Like this very much in my sensibility range,
Yes, this is very much like a niche cult film, and generally critics don't care about rating niche cult movies at all, let alone negatively. So it would make sense that the one review is at least fresh. And then speaking of, let's get to the trivia. Now, there were literally 5 facts on IMDb for trivia, and not even all of them are very interesting, but I included all 5 of them anyways because it's pretty short. So the very first trivia fact here is Christopher Lee, who is featured in this film, he filmed his key role in a single day, which I think rocks, because he is in the movie, but he's not in a lot of the movie, unfortunately.
It's a lot of Christopher Lee's later roles, people could kind of get him because Christopher Lee is one of those actors who works. He liked to work. He's a very old-fashioned actor. So especially if you're doing like a horror movie, you could probably get Christopher Lee later in life to do a couple of scenes in your shitty movie. And
yes,
he would
exactly.
He would act in them. He would do good.
Yeah, you'd pay him $5,000 for the day, and like, okay, be in 2 sets. We have one set here and one set that's 10 feet away from here, and we'll shoot all the scenes right here. So I thought,
shit. Yeah.
So I thought that was very, very cool. They used Christopher Lee very effectively in this movie because even though he's not in the movie a lot, his scenes are all great. He's great in this movie.
And I want to say I recently watched a another later Christopher Lee movie, The Wicker Tree, which did a similar thing, and you felt bad seeing Christopher Lee in that movie because it was such dark shit, and they didn't really use him at all. But Funny Man does use Christopher Lee effectively. Like they recognize his skill and they do use it. They give him some room to act.
Yes, and I do believe The Wicker Tree is the sequel to Wicker Man. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's such dog shit, dude.
Yeah, I saw that movie. I saw that movie at Mega Media Exchange once, and I was like, "Yeah, no thanks, no thanks."
Oh, you should watch it. You know how that? Sorry, a little bit of a side tangent. You know how the whole thing with The Wicker Man is that it's this great gothic horror movie that's like overtly Christian, and you're like, this kind of that kind of sucks, but it's like a good movie or whatever.
Mhm.
Imagine this guy, that same guy that wrote and directed it in his 80s now making the follow up, and how much more out of touch all the Christian shit would be in it. And you've got The Wicker Tree.
I could tell you one of the only directors that can make a sequel to a famous IP when he's in those when they're in their 70s or 80s and it be good is definitely George Miller, and that's pretty much it. That's all I could think of. Mad Max Fury Road, the best movie ever directed by a 79-year-old man. But yes, next fact here is this movie was initially intended to be a serious horror film, and the project was partially treated as such. However, Tim James, who plays the character Funny Man, evolved his character greatly during production, which caused director Simon Sprackling to gradually ignore the script. Because of this, several scenes were the result of improvisation. Now, this was something that you had mentioned to me over the chat, what would this movie be if it wasn't an irreverent horror comedy?
And my guess, I've been thinking about this. So the shadow of Freddy Krueger, it's so obvious, it looms so large over this series.
Yes, it does.
But it's just in aesthetic, in the manner of the kills. To me, this is like British comedy mixed with a Nightmare on Elm Street. And my guess is that maybe it was originally more serious and they wanted kind of a sarcastic kind of, mildly funny killer that did quips. And they get this comic actor who just when he starts joking, I have to guess comes alive. Because he's so fun. What's that actor's name again?
Tim James.
And he's so fun to watch in this movie. And you see him the twinkle in his eyes as Funny Man. And I think they must have seen that on set. And just suddenly it hit that they're like, oh, this is what the movie is. This will make it infinitely more interesting.
I mean, you think with a British comedy horror film, they would actually get Robert Englund himself to be in it, but I guess that was too on the nose, right? Nah.
Man, I still have not seen the that shitty Nightmare on Elm Street remake that came out because I don't accept any Freddy Krueger that's not Robert Englund.
You know what? I have it on DVD and I've never watched it either.
Maybe we'll do that someday.
Yeah. Next fact here is, according to Simon Sprackling's production notes, he and other crew members were reportedly on drugs during the filming of this film, which is not very surprising.
And because it was a positive experience, it doesn't sound like, from what I read, which admittedly wasn't that much, there's not a lot of information. It sounds like it was a fun, kind of lighthearted shoot. It wasn't like a debauched shoot.
Oh, yes, very much so. It doesn't really seem like a lot of people are under duress. It seems like people are having fun during the filming of this, which is great to see, obviously.
God, can you imagine if they were under turmoil and abuse and just exhausting themselves to make this fucking movie?
It's like that island of Dr. Moreau. But you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. With Val Kilmer.
Imagine if that's going on during this. That'd be wild.
Oh man, I need to see that movie.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. Next fact here is this was the last theatrical movie of the actor Ed Bishop, who plays one of the card players in the opening scene. Now, I looked up his filmography, and he was an incredibly prolific TV actor, going back he was in the business for 50 fucking years, and he just did TV show after TV show after TV show, and this was his last theatrical film. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And he is
one of those guys that just works.
Yes, and he was also probably most famous outside of his films for crashing a I don't know, it was some sort of party where he dressed up as Augusto Pinochet and Hitler, which I find very bizarre. Apparently, it was an anti-war stunt because he was a very vehemently anti-war. So, and he did it as a criticism of the Tories supporting Pinochet and Hitler. So,
all right, it's kind of cool.
Yes. And also he was American by birth, so he's an American owning the Brits, which is something we love to see.
We love to see it.
And the last fact, and this isn't even really a fact, this is just plainly obvious. The hitchhikers picked up in the van are based on the Scooby-Doo characters minus Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
That's not really a fact, it's just very basic bit right there.
And it's kind of
one of the characters looks exactly like Velma and is named Thelma.
Thelma Thud. Other than that, you kind of could be forgiven for not thinking of them as in the Scooby-Doo game, but except for one of them is Thelma. Her name is Thelma, and she just is that character.
Yes, exactly. Not nearly as hot as Velma, unfortunately, but
no, too bad.
Too bad.
Not bad. No Velma though. My other factoid for this, Pauline Black of The Selector is one of the main actors in this movie. The Selector, obviously, early ska revival, one of the first kind of ska punk bands that are on the legendary Two Tone label. This seems to have been, you can tell she's having fun. It seems like it's kind of a lark for her. This would have been a ways after the Selector's kind of heyday musically. But interesting to see her in a movie like this because she didn't do much acting, you know?
Yeah, so I looked up her filmography, and this was, one of the few films that she ever did.
Interested, I'm curious to know if maybe an agent got her this role, or if it was just a thing that she did almost like as a hobby because it was like a weird movie or something.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of weird movie, let's get into the synopsis. Now, the rip that I have on YouTube, which is not complete because it is a little bit shorter than the stated length, but I think it probably includes 99% of the movie outside of the credits. But the film begins with a quote from Corinthians, and I quote, "If anyone thinks he is wise for his age, let him become a fool, that he may find true wisdom," which I thought was a very interesting quote to start the film off with.
Right off the bat, we're getting echoes of Nightmare on Elm Street. Of course, parts 3, 4, and 6 all start with quotes that are just quotes over a black screen. Of course, in those movies, they sort of are relevant. This sort of barely ties into the jester theme of Funny Man.
Yeah. And in the very first scene, we see the character of Max Taylor, played by the actor Benny Young, winning the ancestral home of Callum Chance, who is once again played by Christopher Lee, in a game of poker. Now, this is actually maybe one of my favorite scenes of the movie, because honestly, the performances in it are pretty good. I like the atmosphere, the sort of smoke-filled room as they're playing poker. And just to me, it just feels very 90s noir in a way, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, well, there's that, and then it makes me think of, there's something about this opening that is a little bit weirder than the rest of the film. It's a little bit Twilight Zone feeling, and it is kind of like, of course, like we'd seen the trailer, we kind of knew what this movie was doing. But you can imagine going into blind to this movie, that would be a little bit of a surprising way to come in.
Yes.
It might be it kind of would catch you off guard.
Yeah, it definitely does have a different feel than the rest of the movie, but I quite like it. And also at the 3:59 mark, Christopher Lee title drops the film, which I thought was very funny. It's like, damn, a title drop already. He says, "You think you're a funny man, Mr. Taylor," or something like that. And I was like, yeah, we're already in it.
We're in it.
But Max Taylor chooses to ignore Chance's ominous warning that you think you're a funny man, but the fun is just beginning, I believe is the line. Because like, you know what? I'm a rich asshole. I just bought your house, old man. Not bought, but I stole your house. The next scene here, with the opening credits, we see a group of hitchhikers led by Max's brother Johnny, played by the actor Matthew Devitt. Now, I told you, Brian, in the chat before we reviewed this movie, that this actor looks exactly like Seth Putnam of Anal Cunt. And I kind of like to think, and of course, Johnny, we later learn, is a musician. I would like to think that he was writing a song that was called Driving to my brother's new house with a bunch of hitchhikers is gay, but I could be wrong about that.
That's the lost on the end credits that Christopher Lee sings.
Yeah, that's a lost song off of what is it? It Only Gets Worse.
Yeah. Yep.
But they're moving through the English countryside, heading to the estate. Now, there's some interesting characters among these hitchhikers. One of them, once again, is Pauline Black, who, or not, that's the actress who played her, but I believe she is credited as Psychic Commando in the credits. There's also Thelma, who is obviously a very obvious Velma from Scooby-Doo.
She is Velma.
Yes, and there's also two guys. One with is that the guy with the bowl cut and like the British like shirt on him or something like that?
Yeah, and that's like these two characters are literally they're interchangeable. I guess they're Fred and Shaky-esque, but
it really doesn't work. It really doesn't work. There are two of my least favorite characters of this whole movie. I don't think they're very interesting, unfortunately.
No, there's I mean, all the characters in this movie, obviously, given the type of movie it is, are paper thin. But these two characters, literally, they don't have any personality to speak of. They kind of just, like, I guess one of them is kind of a stoner, right? Vaguely.
Yeah, one of them is a stoner, and the other is just, he has a bowl cut. That's pretty much all I can really identify.
If there's any identifiable personality traits to the other one.
But most prominently among the hitchhikers is the, once again, Psychic Commando, who uses her tarot cards to learn about the awakening of the Funny Man. And in fact, at one point when Funny Man comes out, there's a part where they pan to her in the van and she goes, "Funny Man." And it's it's very interesting.
That's the most frustrating thing about this movie. And I understand what kind of movie this is. Paper thin plot, working in horror tropes, kind of heightened and goofy and whatever. But you keep expecting there to be some sort of relationship, right, between the Voodoo Commando and Funny Man. Some sort of, maybe she had some sort of backstory or something. Like, this indicates that there'd be some reason that she would know about this beyond just having tarot cards, right?
Yeah, and it's weird because, in the movie, she's like, oh, there must be some connection. And it's like, oh, no, she's just a crank. That's all. Yeah. Like that.
Yeah.
They really dropped the ball with that one, in my opinion, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
She's still a great character, and that's kind of all that matters to me.
She's one of the only characters in the movie. I mean, one of actually.
Yeah, exactly.
It's her, Thelma, Seth Putnam, and Funny Man are the only the four personalities.
Oh shit. But yeah, definitely. Yeah, Funny Man, Seth Putnam, her, and that's kind of about it. And of course, Velma, of course, has her various enjoyable scenes, obviously, of course. But
yeah. But you could cut the other characters and it would be more or less the same.
Exactly. After Max moves into the ancestral home with his family. Now, not necessarily moving, they're just kind of visiting because his wife is just like, we know we have our home in LA and we have our home in Paris and London, and we're definitely not staying here.
And like, why would you? This place is doesn't seem cool. It's like 1,000,000 years old. You have all these other places.
Yes, and also I forgot to mention. So Max is he's some sort of record executive or a producer or a talent agent or something, but he is wealthy by the dialogue and his sort of very carefree lifestyle, including his love of a certain powdery white substance. He loves that powdery white substance. By
parents that often, like, I guess, just do cocaine with her. I mean, I know some parents do, but is that the vibe you get from these two characters until they start doing lines?
Yeah, interestingly enough, so another connection I have with cocaine, does Max Taylor kind of look like Quentin Tarantino a little bit?
I thought he kind of looked like Tim Roth, actually.
Oh, yeah, Tim Roth. Yep, Tim Roth. Yep. I feel like Quentin Tarantino and Tim Roth both love cocaine. There's no way they don't.
Q definitely loves cocaine.
Oh, yeah. No question.
Guy's fucking gacked out all the time.
But after they check out the home for a little bit, Max finds a wheel of chance. It is a wheel with 4 parts, 2 saying win and 2 saying lose. As he spin it, it lands upon lose. and this awakens a demonic creature that lives in the soil of the ancestral home, which is, of course, Funny Man himself.
This is the other thing with this fucking wheel is like it doesn't need to exist. It doesn't explain anything about Funny Man. You may as well just have him appear for no reason. It's
Yep.
not like the plot makes any more sense because of this wheel. It's not really visited. It's sort of
yeah. It honestly, to me, it honestly feels like this movie has a lot of different horror tropes, and it's just putting them all in the movie.
But it doesn't need any of them. You could literally just have Funny Man just be here. It would not. Nobody would give a shit.
Funny Man could be like one of the ancient butlers who gets resurrected or something. Like it doesn't really matter, you know?
Yeah.
The first kill we see is Max's son, because he comes with his son, wife, and daughter. But Max's son is killed first by the Funny Man. And we thankfully don't see Funny Man kill this very small child, but the child is definitely dead. Because at one point he taunts Max and his wife by kind of putting on the voice of their son.
Yeah.
And
you do dragging the child's body through a hallway. It's weird because this is not like a heavy horror movie. And to start it with like, you see like, at least the silhouette of like a little kid's dead body is just strange. It's a little off-putting.
Yeah, it is. That was a little weird. I was like, oh, they really went there. Okay. I guess British movies really don't give a shit about that. Or
I didn't even think it was that. I think it's just a miscalculation where they were like, this is a silly movie, who cares? But it is weird. Also, it's weird to show like just a kid's like kind of lifeless body being dragged. It's just a weird thing, and I don't think they thought about it as they were making the movie.
No, they probably didn't. But yeah, so Funny Man, he is a jester with a varied and imaginative repertoire of homicidal techniques and a highly irreverent sense of humor. That was what I gleaned from Wikipedia, and I think that is perfect.
Yeah, he's Bugs Bunny.
Yes.
He's a court jester. He acts like Bugs Bunny. He murders people in cartoon ways.
Yes, and he also breaks the fourth wall very frequently in the movie by speaking directly to the audience.
Yep,
just like Bugs Bunny does.
Yeah, exactly. A huge chin.
Yes, very prominent, beautiful chin.
A beautiful chin.
The next death scene is Max's wife is beaten to death with a club after failing to escape an endless room. Now, this was one of the more early scenes reminiscent of Bugs Bunny and Looney Tunes. Because essentially she's just running downstairs and constantly going through the same room, and eventually she's like, okay, whatever. Yeah. Or I love when he walks up to her and he's like, oh, do you come here often? And she's like, and just like slowly walks back.
Even that's kind of Looney Tunes. You could almost see Bugs saying that's like Elmer Fudd, and Elmer Fudd replying and then slowly like doing a double take. That's basically the response she has.
Yes. But unfortunately, once again, Max's wife is not able to escape, and she is beaten to death with a club, which is also a pretty brutal death for this movie. Like, it's just
pretty brutal. This one works better for me than the one with the kid because it's so goofy and gory, and also because they set her up to be just awful. You don't really care if it was about. The gore here is pretty gross, but it is very silly.
Yes, very much so. And then finally, among the rest of the family, Max's daughter is killed when Funny Man hooks jumper cables up to her head, electrocuting her to death to the point where she catches on fire. That was another funny scene because she's playing Mario and she keeps saying jump, and then Funny Man just keeps jumping in the background, and then eventually, puts the fucking jumper cables to her head as she explodes and gets set on fire.
Yeah, that was one of the most, I felt like, Nightmare on Elm Street esque. If like a later Elm Street esque.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. That is very, very late Nightmare on Elm Street. Like very much like welcome to primetime bitch kind of thing. Or also the Power Glove death from I think part 5.
Yes, exactly. It's very much like that's part 6.
Oh, that is part 6. Okay.
Which is the one that this movie, I would say, is the most similar to. It's just because part 6 of Nightmare on Elm Street is so cartoonish, and this movie is even more cartoonish than an Elvis movie. It's
now you're playing with power.
Those movies.
I love the Nightmare. Even the bad Nightmare on Elm Street movies, I love. I love all of them.
Same. This is like I enjoyed this movie, but this is kind of like the worst Nightmare on Elm Street movie.
Oh, very much so. Yes, I will totally agree with that. But to be fair, even the worst Nightmare on Elm Street movie is still pretty enjoyable.
It's got Robert Englund. It's got these cool effects. I mean,
yeah, exactly. But eventually, after all this, and then of course, as Max is finally confronted by Funny Man himself and gets shot through a chimney while he's once again high on cocaine, and in fact, Funny Man shoots him through a giant pile of cocaine up into the chimney.
Hearing you describe this movie, I'm imagining what it would be like to listen to this podcast, having not seen the movie. It must seem so confusing. Like, such a bizarre sequence of images that we're describing.
Yeah, no, exactly. But yes, once again, Johnny and the Hitchhikers finally make their way to the mansion, where the psychic commando immediately suspects something is amiss. She just sees around, she's like, there's something and I'm not going to do her accent because she puts on a very distinctly Caribbean patois is probably the best way I can put it. Probably distinctly Jamaican, I would say, but
which, I mean, Charlie Black did have an accent. She's putting it on for this movie, of course.
Yeah, but isn't she from like the UK? Like, she's not even from Jamaica.
Yeah.
So, but needless to say, her impersonation of a Jamaican is way better than mine. So, I don't want to be canceled like Jack Black soon will be when people remember that he played a white Jamaican guy with dreads in I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer. So
wait,
yes.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that.
He was a Jamaican white guy with dreads in the I Know What You Did Last Summer sequel. So
friend of Jack Black.
Yes. Jack Black Man. No, I'm just kidding. I won't go there. Now this, I will say, this next probably like 15 to 20 minutes is easily my least favorite part of the film.
Yeah.
It is very boring. It drags. There's some okay establishing segments here, but most of it is just kind of a slog. Now, there are some funny segments, such as when Funny Man plays soccer with, whose head was that?
It's just is that the head of, well, that wouldn't be the head of the wife, because her head is...
It looked like Seth Putnam's head. It looked like Johnny Seth Putnam's head, but I don't think it was.
I thought it was a woman's head, but I at the same time I was like, whose is this?
Yeah, and after rewatching it, I still couldn't see whose it was, to be honest.
The thing with that, I guess, is that it's almost discovered by our two boring, no personality members of the kind of beatnik hippie crew, right? They see him behind and they think it's just the ball, so they go to kick it, sending this head, which, again, whose is it? Is it just some fucking disembodied head that Funny Man ginned up? Because there's no one else in this castle.
Yeah, exactly. The Psychic Commando does various rituals, including injecting something in between the webs of her fingers that we're not entirely sure of until later in the movie.
I don't know what the fuck that's... Yeah.
Yeah, just bizarre.
One of the real problems with this movie, and I think because this is also where Thelma starts to get her sort of build, as they're looking on, is that we have two potential protagonists to this movie who would be pretty different and pretty interesting for a fantasy horror comedy. We've got the Psychic Commando, and then we have Thelma Fun. And they're both setting themselves up, the movie kind of setting them up as our people who are going to stand up to Funny Man. Of course, what works about Nightmare on Elm Street is that even in the worst of those films, we have an interesting protagonist who embodies like good and is going to stand up to Freddy Krueger. And where Freddy Krueger is, doesn't respect life and is evil and sadistic and makes jokes, we have this protagonist who's serious and studious and not distracted, and they're going to stand up to him. That's what this movie needed. And we have two characters set up who could have been that, and it would have been different from protagonists like that in any other movie. There is no Jamaican, like, voodoo priestess or fucking Velma in any other slasher movie as our protagonist.
Yeah, no, it could have been very interesting, but yeah, it definitely dropped the ball there, unfortunately. And speaking of Velma...
Do you think that they do anything with these characters? Because you would think they would. When you watch the movie, it seems like they're going to do something with them.
No, possibly. And well, speaking of things that Velma does, so the most prominent scene she's in is She looks around the kitchen, and once again, a very Scooby-Doo scene where Funny Man is hiding in like a giant Dutch oven. And as Max comes by, because Max is basically like funneled around this mansion in it almost I would describe it as like a nightmarish fucking roller coaster ride because he's just constantly being funneled around. And he goes, "Duck!" And she goes, "Where?" And then Funny Man literally blows her brains out.
So the whole lead up to this too is that Thelma and I'm just gonna call her Pauline Black
Yes.
have both, sensed early on this evil presence. Well, Voodoo Commando senses that Thelma just is taking it seriously because she's a nerd and she takes things seriously, and everyone's kind of discounting her. Funny Man is making quacking noises while Thelma investigates and looks for clues. So she's convinced there's a duck that she's trying to find. Um, while she's looking around for this duck, at some point, Funny Man stands behind her with like a bazooka and is aiming it at her head. What's his name on the roller coaster goes past, sees Funny Man with the bazooka behind Thelma, says, "Duck, where?" And we get a terrific scene of Thelma getting her brains blown out with her glasses still on.
That honestly was my single favorite moment in the entire movie. I laughed pretty hard at that one.
Yeah, that's my favorite, and it's because it takes the cartoonishness to such an extreme degree that it exits the world of Nightmare on Elm Street ripoff into something else.
Yes,
into something so heightened that that movie needed to go farther in that direction. To me,
I will 100% agree with that. Absolutely. All right. So yes, after the scene where Velma, of course, gets her brains blown out, one of the other hitchhikers, that I assume the Shaggy allegory, gets his hands and head stuck into a wall as he is forced to pantomime a puppet show on a beach in Britain somewhere.
Oh yeah, this is good too. Now we're getting more into what does work about this movie, which are the really fantastical deaths.
Yes, and I really did enjoy this one too. So this guy, he's going through a basement, and after a while he stumbles upon the body of the kid from earlier, and he runs away once again, getting half of the top of his head and his hands getting stuck in a wall, and he's once again forced to do a puppet show for Funny Man on a beach, and eventually his hands and his head explode. Now that was one of my favorite effects of the whole movie. It looks pretty great.
And it's not just the head exploding, which is great. I guess it's it's a callback. It's a Punch and Judy bit, the classic British children's, or adults, I guess, like satirical Punch and Judy married couple. And this guy, his hands, I guess, are like kind of carved into Punch and Judy. Like you see all the muscle and the sinew under his hands, and now where his hands would be, there's just lumps of flesh that are shaped like Punch and Judy puppets.
Yes, and also he does that earlier in the movie when they're hitchhiking too. I totally forgot about that until you just mentioned it. But yeah,
he does like kind of like before this happens in the van earlier. This character does like, I guess, like an edgy modern Punch and Judy bit for everyone that they are not amused by.
Yeah, no, oh boy, they are not amused by it. That's for sure. And then one of the other hitchhikers, the one who's supposed to be the Fred one, I guess, the guy with the bowl cut.
They said don't commit to the Scooby-Doo bit, except for with Velma, that it's like, well, who's Shaggy, who's Fred, like who even, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I'm assuming this guy's Fred because he's blonde, and he has a bowl cut, but that's
short hair.
Yeah. But this is a pretty funny scene because he gets lured into a strip club where he's forced to wear various wigs.
Acid wigs. They're psychedelic wigs. And this is a great scene because it's so fucking weird. This really is going into like the Python-esque kind of like absurdist humor.
And I also remember that he's forced to pay like £100 for a shitty beer too.
Yeah, like a Molson's or something, probably.
Yeah. And he's like, "Oh, that's bizarre." And I mean, it's a pretty funny bit. I'll just say that.
Well, it's also like what is funny. Funny Man is first selling this guy psychedelic wigs that are like wigs that give you a different psychedelic experience, I guess. Yeah. And then Funny Man is now a bartender who's charging him all these service fees, and the guy, it's like, what does Funny Man need this guy's money?
Yeah, right.
He's like a demon or something, right? And also that the guy just keeps giving him his money. He's like, all right, I'll stay. Like, aren't you in a castle? Like,
yeah. And then eventually we get to the Funny Man strip show, where I will say, pretty good fake tits you got there, bud.
No, very pointed. Like I was actually waiting for Funny Man's nipples they're so huge. They're just massive nips. And I was like, and I kept thinking, oh, they're gonna do a bit where he pokes his eyes out. And I was surprised by the restraint they showed to not do it.
Yeah, honestly, very pointy, very large tits. It kind of reminds me of that Canadian teacher, if you know who I'm talking about. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh,
There's like some probably like conservative sort of rabble rouser who's like wearing giant fake tits
oh,
to their teaching job.
Greg Gutfeld talks about this person. That's why I know about it.
Yeah, I have no idea what's going on there, but it kind of reminded me of that a little bit. Like it's just so over the top. I will say, Mr. What's your name again? Tim something? Tim James. If you want to do a femboy show with me personally, I'll allow it. That's fine. No.
Tim James.
Yeah,
I just want to like, if you like this type of weird movie, to anyone listening, I can recommend this movie to a certain type of person. Tim James' performance is so fun. It isn't quite on the level of like Robert Englund, because who is? But he's really enjoying and really living in this, like really relishing this type of villain.
Yeah, no, he has a very good stage presence for this type of character, 100%, and he is very much he's very much like one of the shining parts of this movie for sure.
The shining part of this movie, you might say.
Oh, very much so. And then that bowl cut Fred hitchhiker is eventually killed outside of what is essentially what's like a bar fight with Funny Man, where
this is the funniest scene. This is sorry, I won't.
No, go ahead. But so Fred essentially kind of insults this Funny Man's wife, I guess, and he gets stabbed in the eye with a stiletto.
This is such a like left field thing, because I keep kind of alluding to like the British comedy sensibility. And so sometimes it's really absurd and surreal, but sometimes it's really dry. And this is like really going in on the dry thing where this guy's just having a back and forth with Funny Man. It inadvertently insults, quote unquote, his wife. And he's just kind of like, what? That's my wife. And it goes on for so long. It's such an uncomfortable scene.
It really, really does, for sure. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for what it was.
A lot of John Cleese in Tim James. Is that his name? A lot of John Cleese in him, I think.
Yes. And then the next scene here, this one actually made me laugh the hardest because it's actually very relevant to the podcast. But Johnny eventually gets a letter from Funny Man himself stating that he was originally in the running for the Rolling Stones, their guitarist. Who took their place? Ronnie Wood. So, Brian, that is your Ronnie trifecta.
You finally did it, guys.
And you didn't. I don't even know if you meant to do that.
No, of course not. I wish I did, Taylor. I wish that I was a clever enough soul that I could think like, I gotta keep going to the Ronnie well, but no.
Yeah. No, I thought it was hilarious too, because it's just like, oh, wait, this Seth Putnam kind of frumpy looking British guy was gonna replace Ronnie Wood, or was going to take the place of him? Like, what?
Yeah. It's nonsense.
It's just bizarre.
Hear some of his songs later on. It truly is nonsense to think that this guy would have been in the Stones.
Yeah, weird. But whatever. Either way, it was funny enough, obviously, for the Millennials Are Old connection there with Ronnie. But we learned that Max stiffs him and once again chooses Ronnie Wood over him. Which, why wouldn't you choose Ronnie Wood over this frumpy looking Seth Putnam looking guy once again?
Seth Putnam couldn't play any instruments.
Oh, you know what? That's not true, Brian. Okay, he was the best instrumentalist of all time. There's a picture that I have of Seth Putnam playing a guitar, so clearly he could play one. I actually have no idea whether he could or not.
I just said holding an instrument blows my mind.
Yeah, I just know that he has one of the most beautiful romantic singing voices of our age. That is for sure.
He loved Buckcherry.
Did Seth Putnam love Buckcherry? Is that true?
He used to cover Crazy Bitch live and sing it in his style.
Oh, God. That makes a lot of fucking sense. I'll just say that.
I know. Isn't that awesome?
But you know what? If you want to hear his illustrious, beautiful singing voice, Seth Putnam, listen to the album Picnic of Love.
Beautiful.
Which is a beautiful album, including
As a
including
woman
the
and
song, yes, including the song that is very relevant because, of course, a couple days ago it was International Women's Day. I respect your feelings as a woman and a human.
I don't want to get too into the weeds because obviously, as bad bands go, they're one of the worst. But boy, I've listened to enough of that band in my time.
Yeah, me too. And if anybody's interested, listen to our award-winning video on Dick Proles, an anal cunt history lesson. So, which I have now seen has over 8,000 views on YouTube.
I mean, that is a band with a fascinating history, like truly.
Oh no, for sure. But I just thought it was really funny that a video that I literally just read off Anal Cunt's Wikipedia article is our most viewed video by far on that channel. Really.
That's awesome.
Oh, I'm sorry, Anal Cunt History Lesson. That's what the video is called. And
a lot of people probably clicked on that link looking for a different kind of history lesson.
Oh no, for sure. Oh yeah. To be fair, the thumbnail is Seth Putnam's face, so I don't know what else they could have found. But
yeah.
And also, you know who loves that video is the vocalist for Emir, Frankie Palmieri. So you know what?
Of course, that fucking guy looks.
Just really, it's great.
You did make the thumbnail the classic picture of Seth and the young lady on stage. Well, he ties up.
So actually, on the episode of Dick Proles where that clip is featured from, the thumbnail is that, but one of our friends photoshopped Donald Trump's face on Seth Putnam's face.
That's good.
It's very good. I laughed very hard when I saw that. But the last surviving hitchhiker, the Psychic Commando, and Funny Man have their showdown, which I did not mention earlier, but I really actually love the set piece and how they set it up with them, because she's like going down this like infinitely running spiral staircase, and it's actually a very cool.
It's good. It's good. The whole movie seems to be leading up to this final confrontation between Psychic Commando and Funny Man. It feels cool. It's like it got a big showdown, epic presence. The actual battle itself,
yeah, it's definitely leaves a little bit desired, but after, once again, she injects that thing in between the web of her fingers, it eventually extends to like a giant bazooka thing, and she just shoots Funny Man for like a minute or two. And then she goes to a barn in this little weird town that they're having a duel in, and there's a chest burster scene where Funny Man bursts out of her chest. I still don't understand what happened there.
This whole scene is, it looks cool. The chest bursting, the bazooka, all the effects look cool. The battle begins, got kind of a spaghetti western motif.
Yeah, even on the town it says population 1. So of course I would assume that's a reference to this town ain't big enough for the two of us, but I could be wrong about that.
It is, yeah. But just obviously it's a fantasy movie. It could have its own internal logic, but it doesn't even really have that. Things just sort of happen. Seems like they made up the effects and just had to have them go through. And also just kind of a disappointing end for the only character that we've really maybe invested in as a possible hero.
Yeah, that scene very much definitely fell flat for me quite a bit. I'll just say that. But speaking of scenes that don't fall flat for me, Funny Man and Johnny finally interact, and Funny Man gives Johnny a chance to shred and become the rock star. In fact, he becomes a literal star at the very end of the song. And I thought this was interesting. So this was before, obviously, we all knew what happened. But Funny Man looks exactly like Jimmy Saville in this scene. Yeah, that is aged extremely poorly.
Or maybe it's aged extremely well, given that Funny Man is
he is a perverse murderer. Jimmy Saville, as far as we're aware of, Jimmy Saville did not murder anybody, but boy was he perverse.
But he did steal the eyeballs from dead children.
Yes. For anybody who's not aware, to the audience at home, massive trigger warning, but if you're interested in reading about Jimmy Saville, he was an almost uniquely monstrous person.
It's very, oh my God.
Yes. Imagine if Casey Kasem was the world's worst sexual abuser.
Like the worst. And I know that sounds that sounds hyperbolic if you don't know the story of Jimmy Saville, but wow, it's unreal. It sounds unreal. He literally stole the eyeballs from dead children.
Yes, and also if you look at the timeline, he was literally abusing children and unconscious adult women, etc. Literally constantly. Constantly. He was a predator in the most base sense of that term.
His whole life, his whole career was revolved around being near pop bands that would put him in proximity to young people who he was constantly abusing.
Yes, and Funny Man, very reminiscent because he abuses a lot of people in this movie to bring some levity to it. But yeah, I thought him looking like Jimmy Saville was, that was rough. But I noticed that immediately. I'm like, oh, that's just he's just like Jimmy.
That's just how 70% of British men look.
Oh yeah, that's actually great. Jimmy Saville was a real sex symbol back in the day, but not the kind of sex symbol anyone wants to have. Oh, geez. Oh, that was bad.
I enjoyed that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. But yes, once again, Jimmy gets turned into a literal star as he shoots into the sky to literally burn into the atmosphere. And in the very final scene, we see that Callum Chance is actually in a psych ward as he's playing his card games. And the nurse there. Oh, and also Callum Chance also throughout the movie a couple times has various quips after certain scenes. I'll just say that too. So we do see him intermittently throughout the movie, but this is the last scene where we see him have his final line of dialogue. And she says, "Don't you want to play with the others? It's more fun to play with others." And he says, "Oh, is it?" And that's the last we see of Callum Chance.
Kind of a little Tales script ending.
Oh, very much so. And Johnny, in this now universe, Johnny really does become a legendary rock star as a radio station announces him as the world's most legendary rock star or something like that.
And Funny Man is listening to the song wistfully.
And then,
did you listen to the song "Path to Glory"?
No, I only listened to the songs that were in the movie. I didn't venture out to find the soundtrack myself.
Those are the only ones you can find online. There is a full soundtrack of original songs, but you can only find the the house techno rave theme and "Path to Glory," which is the song playing on the radio at the end. That Funny Man is awful.
Yeah, it's not great. Not great.
Like Bryan Adams. Kind of sub Bryan Adams.
Yeah.
World's greatest rock star.
Oh, very much so. And then in the very last shot of the film, we see that Funny Man is now eternally torturing Max as he's covered in blood, holding various Joker cards while saying, "It's quite funny, it's quite funny." And you see he's also made to wear a crown of severed arm, which is very much like a Joker's hat, but much more morbid. And I also...
final image, pretty great. Like, as a final image of the film, pretty cool and kind of creepy.
And also, we didn't mention too much, but there is obviously very much a Joker card theme throughout this movie.
That's his card.
But yes, that is the plot, once again, as thin as it is, the plot for Funny Man. Now, I will say, this is a movie that I know I've already said my opinions throughout a lot of this. I did enjoy this movie, and I think this movie had a lot of potential to be amazing. But unfortunately, I don't think a lot of the scenes really lived up to the potential that it could have offered.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And listeners, I know that it probably seems when you just hear us talk about this movie, you're like, "Oh, this is so disjointed, this is so abstract, and it's so not tied together." They must be, missing elements of the plot. I swear to God, we're not. The synopsis that Taylor just gave that you listened to makes literally as much sense when you are watching the film.
Yes. I swear very much so. And I will say too, I love the trailer for this movie. And if the movie had that same energy or the trailer had the same energy throughout as the movie should have had, I would say this was like an incredibly underrated horror classic. But unfortunately, it just does not keep that pace up throughout. So, and I will say, I think the first 30 minutes are genuinely incredible. I love the first 30 minutes. The next 15, 20-ish minutes, pretty mediocre, and honestly, probably the worst parts of the movie. And then the rest of the movie is pretty hit or miss, but I would say probably a bit more hits than miss for me.
Yeah, there's cool effects. There's, interesting, kind of fantastical, imaginative deaths. Really, though, there isn't any plot. And not just a thin plot, there is no arc for any character.
No.
So after that initial 30 minutes, you aren't invested in anything. There's no tension because you're just watching Funny Man. That's the common, kind of, I think, unfair and often ill-applied criticism of slasher movies. But in this film, it's absolutely true. You're just watching the cast get picked off. The deaths are cool to see. There's no investment in any of the characters. There's no one you really identify with. And there isn't really a story. There's these people show up and Funny Man slaughters them in kind of comedic, surreal ways. And that's it.
Yes, very much so. I think that's that's a very, I would say, succinct way to put it. Absolutely. On speaking of people's opinions about this film, let's get into some Amazon reviews. Now, to get the Amazon reviews for this film was a little bit of a trick because this film does not have an official home media release or any kind of even streaming release in the United States. However, as I showed you, Brian, I was able to find a German import for a 4-disc and 24-page box set, booklet box set of this movie on Amazon, and I took the reviews from that. Now, I think it's interesting, because this movie was a movie that honestly has very little information about it online in English media, but it has enough of an audience to get a 4-disc booklet release.
Don't you want it? Don't you kind of want it?
Well, that's the thing. It is an all-region Blu-ray, so I possibly could. And also this one of the discs is the entire soundtrack for this movie.
So if one is the film and one is the soundtrack, how many features could there possibly be for Funny Man,
Well, I assume because Simon Sprackling probably isn't doing much these days, I assume there's probably quite a few commentary tracks.
That's awesome.
And then I assume one of them is just the DVD of the film, because that's common enough. And then, the CD. So total of 4. So 2 Blu-rays, 1 DVD, and 1 soundtrack. I assume, but I have no idea.
That makes sense. You're probably right. And a booklet.
Yeah, well, the problem is it's probably in German, so I don't know how well.
I'm just saying, think about the cult movies that never get that. Okay, you think any of the Billy Jack movies?
Yeah!
got that kind of respect, get that kind of home release.
To be fair,
I know, I've looked for them.
Well, Born Losers was released on Shout Factory, though.
Yeah, Shout Factory does great work, but there is no giant box set with all this fucking cool shit with it for movies like that. There's no fucking there still isn't an Evil Dead trilogy box set with all this cool shit.
Yeah, that's
by different studios.
Pretty
but
sad.
Funny Man has this lavish box set.
Yeah, this $70 box.
The fuck?
It's bizarre, but I was able to
secrets to the movie lurking in it that would make it all come together. Some sort of I feel like there must be.
No, absolutely. No, you're all good. But I was able to find a couple reviews on here, so I used those. So Jeremy Newbold gives this film 5 stars, and the header of their review says Tim Foolery, and the body of the review says, the body of the review says, Funny Man is probably the greatest film ever made, and it is also one of the best DVD releases ever thanks to the brilliant extra features on this disc. Funny Man is not the sort of film where you need to go into too much detail about the plot, but in a nutshell, a coke-snorting record producer called Max Taylor wins the ancestral home of Callum Chance in a game of poker, but what he doesn't know is that in the house there resides a mischievous and murderous jester who likes to bump people off in imaginative ways, whilst also delivering a killer punchline. Why is it so good? Well, for short, the cast is excellent. Tim James is great as the title character. I totally disagree with this. Is one of the most disagreeable things I've ever read, but I'm going to read this sentence.
James is fine. I would not say the whole cast is excellent.
Oh, no, it gets even worse. They say a sort of funnier version of Freddy Krueger. Vehemently disagree with that.
But it's some fucking limey right there.
Vehemently disagree with that.
Man, this is what the Freddy Krueger.
Yeah. With bells on, and the film also features Pauline Black as a voodoo priestess with a huge afro. Scottish comedian Rona Cameron playing a character based on Velma from Scooby-Doo, and a cameo appearance by the legendary Christopher Lee. The set pieces and one-liners are extremely memorable, with plenty of quotable lines and catchphrases. In fact, this film even contains one of my all-time favorite lines. When Hard Man is sitting in the seedy nightclub and says, "Bloody hell, I feel like I've died and gone to Rotherham." Hilarious stuff. I didn't even know that character had a name.
How would you possibly know that? Hartman?
Hard Man.
Hardman.
Bizarre.
All right. Okay.
Oh, and another thing, the music is good too, and it is not great. There's some okay songs, but I wouldn't say they're great.
The incidental music is fine. The Funny Man theme, the rave song sucks, the rock songs suck. The music is great. I thought that the music was a joke. I thought that they intentionally made the rock song suck because the joke was, imagine if this guy was a rock legend. Then it's like, adult contemporary shit.
Yeah, no, exactly. When I first saw Funny Man many years ago, I didn't like it very much, but with each subsequent viewing, it kind of grew on me, and now I regard it as something of a comedy horror classic.
How many times this guy watched? Does he have like Stockholm syndrome? Like, I enjoyed this movie, but like, how many times in your life are you gonna watch Funny Man?
Yeah, right. I will never forget buying this film on video when it first came out. I bought it from a shop in Mansfield. I took the video case up to the counter, and as the shop assistant was looking for the cassette, she shouted over to her colleague, "I'm looking for the Funny Man." To which her colleague replied, "Well, there's plenty of them around here." Why'd you bring up that anecdote? Nobody cares about your anecdote.
Like, what was this guy, the Funny Man? Is he like, he turned around and he was the fucking evil jester? Like, I don't.
It's just bizarre. This DVD presents the film in a 16:9 widescreen format, and the extra special features include an audio commentary with director Simon Sprackling and star Tim James, trailers, a making-of documentary, a featurette about Tim James, and 3 amusing short films by Simon Sprackling. My only quibble: what happened to the production diary 8-page booklet? As the Funny Man himself would say, I don't know what the bloody world's coming to. I really don't. Now, here's the thing. I think this was actually the highest rated review for this entry, so that's why I chose it. I disagree with a lot of this person's opinions. I really do. First off, he is absolutely not funnier than Freddy Krueger.
Freddy Krueger is the man, friend of the pod, Freddy Krueger.
Yes. Except for in the remake of him actually raping and killing children. Other than that, cool guy.
I want the child rape to be implicit. Thank you very much. I prefer to subtext with my friends.
Exactly. Me too. And speaking of things that may have subtext, let's get into the next review from Miss Ruth Thomas, who gives this film 5 stars. And the header of the review says, "Psychedelic Wig Evening." It's all in caps, so I had to yell it out. A little-known classic and a true gem. I've showed this film to maybe a dozen unsuspecting victims. Sorry, visitors of my house. And they all loved it. Came away quoting it for months. 2 even said it was their favorite film ever.
Quoting it from... Imagine how annoying are the people that just quote Funny Man in conversation regular.
Yeah, right? Oh my God. Remember that phase of late 80s and early 90s US slasher films where the supernatural protagonist dispatched his victims while cracking a witty pun? Well, this mid-90s UK equivalent is along the same sort of premise, except the puns are actually funny.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah,
they're hilarious.
and the methods of dispatch are pretty cool too. The film is cheap, not this version. This is not cheap, but by no means nasty. Yeah. And it's a real shame that the writer-director never furthered his career, as he was obviously hugely talented. If you like these genre films or called cult films, or if you like a laugh, or can recognize talent shining through a low budget, or even if you are just from the north of England or the south of Wales, buy this film. You will not regret it. If you don't like it, you're dead below the eyebrows, and I'll take it off your hands. I know plenty of people who would love it as a present. I don't know who this lady is, but I don't ever want to meet you. You seem weird and annoying.
Yeah. The people that write these... The thing is, like, I like this movie. I'm predisposed to enjoy movies like this, But, like, I can't imagine the person that thinks that, this is a movie that if you watch a lot of weird horror movies, like, when I saw the trailer for this, I was excited because I knew it'd be something different and, yeah, at least kind of up my alley. I wouldn't say that it's, like, a hidden gem.
No, like, absolutely not.
A cultural thing, is it because we're not, like, Northern English?
Yeah, I don't know. I do know in one scene, at the beach scene, there's, like, a Welsh flag in the background, but, like, I don't understand what is distinctly Welsh about this movie. Like I don't know.
It's not.
Yeah, it's just I don't get it at all. But speaking of things I very much get, the last review here is from LF Phantom Reviews, and they give this film 4 stars, and the review says, "Funny man, funny movie," and the body of the
funny movie,
and the body of the review says, "Hair liquor party, trash, Britisher horror, Quatch im Monty Python Gewand, Tumish, Befremdlich, Blutig and Einfach, Anders, Einfach schon," smiley face, which I agree with. I agree with every part of that review. I fully comprehended and understood it, and I thought I read it out very well. But yes, there were a couple German reviews on here, so I wanted to put one in there.
Now I guess like it's a German release only, huh? So
yes,
they deserve more than we do.
So actually,
I want this box set. I want to hear the comments.
I did look that up on eBay, and there are some British releases of this film, but none of them had reviews. So, but this is the only one I could find on Amazon that had reviews, and this is also the only one that probably has a shit ton of special features. I mean, of course, it's a 4-disc fucking box set. Of course, it's gonna have special features, but yes. So that is our review for Funny Man. Do you have any final thoughts before we sign off here, Brian?
No, I'll look up. So this movie's free on YouTube. If you like weird horror comedy and it's like fantastical gore and shit, and you got an hour and a half to kill, you may as well watch this. If you like this kind of thing, it's not great, but it's fun enough. Boy, I really suspect that this is one of those movies where the commentary is actually more interesting than the movie itself. I want to hear that commentary. I want to know about the process of this movie, I guess, how it just came about.
Yes, me too, actually. I think that, and I will definitely go off of what you said there. I think if you are very much looking for sort of niche, like 90s cult films, once again, in the style of that very awkward period in horror between the slasher boom of the 80s and Scream, I think you will find that you will enjoy this movie quite a bit, especially if you like some of the more slapsticky elements of horror. Yeah. But I will say if you're like an average sort of, not even an insulting way, but kind of like a surface level horror fan that doesn't really like the sort of
like horror that's stuff. Good. And I would tell a lot of people off. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you're looking for something that's like distinctly quality and not like independent and low budget, I would not recommend this film because this film is interesting, but it is very much rough around the edges. I will say that.
Yeah, that's I would agree. This isn't a movie. That's why I don't agree with saying that it's like a gem or something. I don't know what these people, because to me that implies something like, again, like Dead Alive, which of course has a big cult following now, but didn't always, which is like a great movie with its weird premise and smaller. This isn't that great. It's fun enough. If you have to already like this kind of shit and be, forgiving of it.
Yeah, especially like early Peter Jackson movies like Dead Alive and stuff like that. Like that is probably the perfect example of like a low budget indie horror film that I think most mainstream horror audiences could like and get something out of it. Especially because it's just so over the top and so overly gory and so goofy.
Just because it, like, that's the goal for different these films, even though on paper they might say, it's Peter Jackson, obviously is like this auteur and this consummate filmmaker. This movie is kind of a mess. It's very fun to watch and some of the scenes really work, but they just couldn't string a whole movie together, I feel like.
No, I totally agree with that. But once again, if you are if you're listening to this from Portland and you just love going to Movie Madness and just browsing all the entries there all day, you will probably love this movie.
It's on YouTube and it's a good quality rip. You may as well watch it if you like that shit.
But if you see a movie on Netflix that looks bad, or is it like some $100 million movie and you're like, oh, what the fuck is this? Then do not watch this movie. 100%, you will not like this movie. I guarantee it.
Here's the perfect. So look up the trailer for it. And if you're interested, if you think, oh, that looks fun and wacky, you will know from the trailer or not whether or not you are on board or not with this movie.
That is
a
perfect litmus test.
Because you see that trailer and you're like, oh, that looks stupid, don't bother watching the movie.
Yes.
If you see the trailer and you're like, oh, that looks like a fun, crazy movie, you may as well watch it because it's free on YouTube.
No, 100%. That is a perfect litmus test, actually, Brian. I will definitely agree with that litmus test whole fucking heartedly. But yes, that is definitely the end of the episode. I have to go to fucking bed soon. Before we sign off here, you have anything to plug, Brian?
John Stab, JONSTABB on Twitter. That's about it.
Yes, and you can follow me at, once again, Carlos Chantor on twitter.com. And also, once again, I will be posting the link for this movie in the episode description so you can watch it for yourself. And also, as Brian said earlier, and once again, I fully agree with, watch the trailer for this film, and if it seems interesting to you, then watch it. But if it does not, I would avoid this movie like the plague, just straight up. And not
Also,
even because it's bad, but
to get the podcast that box set so we can do a more in-depth dive. I'm just kidding, but I'm not going to pay any for that, but I need it.
Yes, I will agree with that. Because it is about $70. So if you want to give us $70 so we can buy a import German Blu-ray, DVD, and CD release of this film, we would greatly appreciate it. And we will also rip it online for you. But yep, this is going to be Taylor signing off. Have a good one, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Absolutely. Have a good one.